I'll do that over. Family Care and Aging Committee will come to order, and a quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is Senate File 2322. Senator Weber is the chief author. Senator Ralph, would you like to move the bill? Senator Weber, you have a delete all amendment?
I have, yes, the A5 amendment, Chair Housley.
Since this is your first stop, would you like to move the amendment? So moved. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senator Weber, go ahead with your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, 2322, I believe, brings a meaningful, large-scale change to the way we conduct child care inspections in Minnesota. The bill will move us away from a punishing one-size-fits-all approach to a system that is more nuanced and fair, and these changes go straight to the heart of many problems we hear about in child care licensing and inspections, and provide significant relief to providers who sometimes feel suffocated by the process. First of all, this bill moves us to a risk-based system for violations. We have created a four-tiered approach that directs licensors to differentiate between violations that pose a risk of harm to children and ones that do not. Under this new model, if a violation is found that poses no risk of harm to the children in care, the licensor will provide technical assistance to the provider by informing them of the violation and suggested ways or examples of how to correct it. As the risk of harm goes up, so does the consequence. And this will bring much needed common sense to the enforcement of licensing violations around the state. Under this system, a correction order need never be issued for cold water or a spot of dust in the wrong spot. Secondly, this bill will enact abbreviated inspections for providers who have a strong history of compliance. The abbreviated inspection will consist of key indicators that statistically predict compliance with a wider set of rules. And I think that it's really important that we focus our time and resources on the providers who need a little extra help with compliance and have an opportunity to reward those who are doing an excellent job. And so, Madam Chair, I also want to state this, that this bill actually has come about fairly quickly. It was an idea that was put together when we saw that we felt that we were maybe lacking in some areas of enough reform. And I think that as we have gone forward, I have promised the providers, I have promised the department, I have promised the licensors that today is not what I consider to be the final version, but that we will continue to move forward, to take suggestions and to massage the language and this bill so that it actually becomes a bill that is capable of meeting the needs of providing a safe environment for our children, as well as for our providers being able to provide an efficient, proficient operation. And so I know that there are some individuals here that do wish to comment, Madam Chair, and at this point I will withhold any more comments until that opportunity has been given them.
Thank you so much, Senator Weber. I know how hard you've worked on this issue for the last interim going around the state. Ms. Seidel from the Minnesota Association of Child Care Providers is the first testifier. Ms. Seidel, please identify yourself for the tape.
Madam Chair and committee members, Julie Seidel, Public Policy Director for Minnesota Association of Child Care Professionals. And we're guardedly optimistic on this. We've taken a look at it, and we believe this can really be a positive system. The only concern that we have, which we are addressing with Senator Weber, is to make sure that DHS doesn't have the control over it, that they've had control over everything else with us. They've demonstrated over the last years their hostility towards family child care. We've lost 3,500 family child care providers in the last 8 years. This needs to be done in a very public and transparent way, and in a manner which something that DHS is really incapable of doing at this point in time. They don't get family child care. And I want to give you an instant here, which just came out on February 19th. We were sent an email by DHS, and it was clarification on when a provider can provide care to children outside of the provider's normal licensing hours. In order for us to do this, there's 3 conditions that must be met. The child or the children are with you outside of your child care operating hours based on the paperwork you have previously submitted to the county licensing agent. That would be our hours of open and close. The children are not currently enrolled in your child care program and you're not being compensated. That second line there, that the children are not currently enrolled in your child care program, is a huge issue. What they have just done now is they have told grandparents that watch their grandchildren they cannot come to their home after daycare hours. We have nieces and nephews. There are children that live in our neighborhoods and small towns that will come to visit. If they're enrolled in our care, they cannot come to our home for a birthday party, a family picnic, or to be with your own grandchildren. DHS does not understand family child care. And that's why I work with Senator Weber that we want to make sure we have input in this, that we're able to teach them what family child care is, how we are different than center care, we are different than school-based care, and just a simple sentence like this literally condemns grandparents from watching their grandkids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Seidel. Ms. Cunningham, testifying from the Minnesota Child Care Provider Information Network. Ms. Cunningham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, I am Cindy Cunningham. I'm a family child care provider here in St. Paul, and I am the public policy chair for the 501c3 State Association. All of these bills, as you know, have come through quickly, so I don't have a whole lot of detail. Comment except that the discussion of a tier system or whatever we want to call it would be welcomed. I can tell you right now this morning I had my relicensing visit and I survived. So there you go. I have one of those reasonable licensors. I've had her for a few years, and she comes in, she knows how to do her job. She also knows I know how to do my job. She's very thorough, but she knows that I've got my job done, and she would have not taken 3 hours, but could have done it much quicker if she could have had this kind of an abbreviated system. And we didn't have that specific conversation, but that's the kind of comments that I have been able to exchange with her. I think the only concern I have when we start talking about this is in Ramsey County, we had a specific situation where we had a couple licensors who I call it the wave of the hand, would say, oh, and you should do. And when providers didn't know what the laws were, then would comply. And that's where a lot of our confusions came from. I really like what's in here is that there has to be a link even on that technical assistance. There has to be a link to what the actual law is. Providers still need to continue to be brought up on that. So I think if we can work together with DHS and with providers and the legislature to come to this kind of an agreement to move forward, I think would be a blessing for licensors and for providers. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cunningham. Members, any questions for Senator Weber or the testifiers? Senator Weber.
Madam Chair, one thing I would like to comment on, and there are at least 3 spots within my bill where I refer to the fact that the commissioner will in conjunction, do certain things in conjunction with providers, licensors, et cetera. And that's not quite the right language, but anyway, to that effect. And, you know, one of the things we have struggled about is so how do you accomplish that in a way that makes people trust the system? And we recognize that there are some trust issues out there in that regard. And I have visited with providers. I have visited with the department. And one of the things that we've been talking about and that I briefly mentioned with you this afternoon, Madam Chair, is the idea of having an outside facilitator come in, that, you know, we can establish those groups that need to be at the table and ask them to be invited. And obviously, it's difficult when you have this type of issue. Obviously, the department has resources that need to be available and made available to assist in that conversation. But I think if we do have that outside facilitator available, that then takes some of that distrust out of there, and it ensures that everyone that's going to be at the table has their input into what we're trying to accomplish. And at the end of the day, Madam Chair and members, this bill is not intended to, once it's passed, to have brought a definite answer and a path forward in terms of this is what we're doing, but rather it provides a path forward for everyone to have the chance to sit down and work out the details for this. And right now, it requires a report to come back January 1st, 2020. And I know that there is some concern, quite to be honest about it, in the department, that maybe that's a rather ambitious date. And I recognize that. But the other part of it is we've talked about this and talked about this and talked about this. And it's time for some things to actually happen in a positive manner. And so in next year, of course, I'm not sure exactly when the start date is of session. If it helped to push the date back to February 1st, I'm willing to sit down and talk about that. But I do think it's important that we move forward. I think it's important for our family care providers, and as we proceed forward, they need to know, and particularly those that are debating about whether they want to stay in the business, that actually we are making meaningful progress and taking meaningful steps to address many of their issues. And I appreciate, I've had conversations with Ms. Seidel and Ms. Cunningham. I've reached out to Ms. Leopold for the licensors. We haven't had an opportunity to talk. I visited with Ms. Wagner from the department, and I've promised all of them in person or on our phone conversations or on our phone messages that indeed, I want to make sure that we address as many of those considerations as we can. But it's also important for everyone to remember that if things aren't done exactly to perfection, by the time that final report comes out, it's intended to come back to the legislature before we come back into session in 2020. And that provides them the assurance that we then will meet and we will be able to sit down and hopefully work out those last details if it's necessary. And I promise them on behalf of the legislature that we will be their buffer, their protection in this process. And I make that commitment to them, and I make that commitment to you, and as well as to the department. And because at the end of the day, we all have to work together to make this opportunity happen. And before I forget, I also want to thank Mr. Hauswald. We put together this last version today. He has worked a lot in these last few days to accomplish that, and I appreciate the efforts he's made.
Thank you, Senator Weber. Senator Eakin?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Weber, for bringing this bill forward. I think this is definitely moving in the right direction, and I think it's important, too. You were talking about the importance of the process so that people have faith in the process, that it's a fair process. And you talked about an outside facilitator, which I think is a good idea. I was wondering if you had ideas as far as who that outside facilitator might be or how that might be done.
I know that there have, Madam Chair, excuse me. I know that there have been a couple of names forwarded to me, and right now we're going to reach out and try and put together a list of names. Also, we need to come up with a reasonable estimate as far as what that cost might be, because I think while we understand the department has resources that they'll need to dedicate to this, we also know that the cost of this outside facilitator is probably something that's not in the budget. And so we're trying to work that out right now, and we'll continue to do so, Madam Chair and Senator Eakin.
Senator Ralph.
Again, I thank you, Senator Weber, for bringing this. I am very impressed by the common sense approach that this has taken. I think it's taken into account the concerns of the child care providers who I have met with, as Ms. Seidel knows, over the past summer and even actually last year. And so I really want to compliment you on the work that has been done in trying to address things in a way that makes sense. and I think you've accomplished that. So I look forward to seeing the final result, but I think you've got a pretty good start here.
Thank you. Members, any more questions? Seeing none, Senator Ralph moves Senate File 2322 to be recommended to pass as amended and referred to Human Services Reform, Finance, and Policy and Elections Committee. It says elections, not really elections. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion prevails.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee.
You're off to elections, Senator Weber.
So,
I was reading it, I was like, "Ah."
see you on the ballot there, Senator.
See ya. All right, here we go. Human Services.
The next bill we have is Senate File 2, Senator Housley. I believe you have some amendments.
Mr. Chair, I do. I have the A4 amendment. That's the delete all. I'd like to move Senate File 2 first, which I've heard they only do that in the House, and we're not supposed to do that in the Senate. We got to clear that up, Liam. Just saying. If Senator Rude would hear, she'd make sure. Anyway, I'd like to move Senate File 2.
Do you want to present the bill as amended, or do you want to move the?
Present the bill as amended. So I have the A4 amendment.
No. Senator Housley moves the A4 amendment. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Bill's A4 amendment is adopted.
And I have the A6 amendment, but I think I will do the A6 amendment after I go to the bill. No, I'll move the A6 amendment. I'll move the A6 amendment also.
Senator Housley moves the A6 amendment. And I believe this is an amendment to the amendment, the A4 amendment.
Yep, A6 amendment to the A4 amendment.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And the amendment is also adopted.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Senate File 2 is a compilation of many different bills heard in this committee throughout the past few months, as well as ideas from the many family child care providers that I've met with in the past year. While the bill is only 20 pages long, it will go a long way to give our child care providers much needed support to continue taking great care of Minnesota's children. We remain focused on reducing government overreach and micromanagement while maintaining emphasis on keeping children safe. Section 1 contains language from Senate File 978 from Senator Kiffmeyer that a licensor must discuss all violations of law or rule during the inspection, and a correction order shall not issue a correction order for violations of law or rule not discussed in the exit interview. Additionally, in hearings and meetings with providers, I heard stories of husbands coming home to have lunch with only their children and receiving a violation, or of a husband mowing the front lawn while the children were playing in the backyard with no contact with other children and receiving a violation. Because of these stories, I've added language that is not a violation if a spouse of a licensed family child care provider is present in the residence during business hours unless the spouse provides sufficient hours or days of child care services for statutory training requirements to apply, or the spouse is designated to be a caregiver, helper, or sub in the family child care program. Section 2 directs the DHS Commissioner to develop a plain language handbook by January 1st, 2020 that describes the process and requirements to become a licensed family child care provider. Section 3 was from Senator Weber, Senate File 886. If there's a dispute between the county licensor and child care provider on the interpretation of a licensing requirement, a county licensor must seek clarification from DHS in writing before issuing a correction order for the disputed interpretation. The provider must be given opportunity to contribute information that may impact the decision to DHS. Section 4 comes from Senator Abler, Senate File 669, expands the child fix-it ticket to allow for violations that may be fixed immediately. Section 5 is Senate File 2343 from me. This is a provision that specifically allows for the pod concept for special family daycare homes. Essentially, it allows multiple individual family care providers to operate in one commercial setting and share specific spaces such as kitchen or bathroom. Section 6, Senate File 1919 from Senator Simonson. This is called the Sippy Cup bill. This section allows water bottles to be used in child care centers instead of needing to use single-use cups or water fountains all the time. Section 7 is from Senator Kiffmeyer, Senate File 980. This language clarifies that licensed providers are not required to take any orientation classes or trainings meant for new providers when they move to a new county. Sections 9 through 15, I'll give you the non-technical description. It creates the annual refresher course, which includes supervising for safety, child development and learning, and any federal block grant topics, then removes annual requirements for those topics. It makes numerous clarifying changes to explain that biennial training requirements must be completed at some time in the second year following the previous training. And it reduces the annual training hours from 16 to 10, and it reduces the child passenger training age from 9 to 8. Exempts emergency substitutes from training requirements, and removes requirement to provide a physical or electronic copy of the emergency preparedness plan to parents upon enrollment. Sections 16 and 17 is from Senator Curran, Senate File 882. These sections exempt certain individuals from training requirements. Relatives who only have access with their child are not required to fulfill training requirements unless they are a designated caregiver, helper, or substitute. Additionally, this language clarifies that in an emergency, a substitute does not need to fulfill the training requirements. Section 18, Senate File 982, Senator Kiffmeyer's. This language removes the requirement that providers give all parents and legal guardians a copy of the provider's emergency preparedness plan. Providers are still required to have the plan available to review and posted in their home or child care center. Section 19, Senate File 1454 or 52 is Senator Howe. It creates an ombudsman for child care providers. This new position would address all areas of concern to child care providers related to child care services, assist providers with working with county licensors, answer questions and provider guidance for providers, and assist child care license applicants. Ombudsman must include a report on the services provided. Section 20 comes from Senator Goggins, Senate File 789. It directs the DHS Commissioner to develop an annual refresher course for child care providers who previously completed the training requirements. Additionally, the Commissioner is directed to eliminate duplicative training requirements. Section 21, Senator Ralph's, Senate File 1034, directs DHS to permit providers to use sub-caregivers for a cumulative total of 720 hours in any 12-month period. Section 22 is Senate File 2296, me, the Family Child Care Task Force, a 16-member task force made up of legislators, DHS, Greater Minnesota, and metro area child care providers, Greater Minnesota and metro area family child care associations, members of the Association of Minnesota Child Care Licensors, and Business Association. This task force must develop a proposal from child care provider licensing structure based on differential monitoring framework, identify licensing requirements that have led to the closure of family child care programs, and recommend business development and technical assistant resources to promote provider recruitment and retainment. identify family child care licensing alternatives, identify and recommend family child care regulatory reforms to improve licensing efficiencies, including variant structure and updated child ratios, and review parent-aware participation, identify obstacles or improvements. The report is required by March 1st, 2020. Section 23, Senator Ralph's 1035, Senate File 1035. It directs the Commissioner to review existing statutes and rules relating to child care licensing and background study requirements and propose legislation for the 2020 session, and eliminates unnecessary and duplicative record keeping or documentation requirements for providers. The Commissioner must also establish a way for providers to electronically submit the information. Section 24 is $75,000 for the task force, of which $24,000 of that is federal money. Section 25 is $234,000 in 2021 and $240,000 in 22-23 for the ombudsperson for child care providers. Of that, $74,000 comes from federal dollars in 2021, $76,000 in 22-23. Section 26 is Senate File 2, $649,000 of deed grants for local communities to increase the supply of child care providers to support economic development. 60% must go to outside metro area. Grants must obtain at least a 50% match. The grants must be used to implement projects to reduce the child care shortage in the state. This includes business startup or expansion, training, facility modification or improvements required for licensing. The Commissioner must give priority to communities that have demonstrated a shortage of child care and include in a report. Section 27 allocates $140,000 for a competitive grant through deed to a nonprofit organization with expertise in small business advising to operate a business training program for child care providers and to create materials that could be used free of charge for startup, expansion, and operation of a child care business statewide, and includes a report. Section 28, Senate File 537, Senator Nelson, $2 million for Minnesota Initiatives Foundation one-time appropriation. They must use the grants to facilitate a plan to sustain and increase the supply of quality child care to support economic development. Engage the private sector to invest resources to support a community solution plan. And provide locally based training and technical assistance to rural child care business through a learning cohort. Recruit child care programs to participate in Parent Aware. And it must also work with local partners to provide low-cost training, professional development opportunities, and continuing education curricula. Section 29, Senate File 1030, Senator Kiffmeyer, revises instruction to codify Rule 9502, Family Child Care Licensing Sections. Section 30, Senate File 1030, Kiffmeyer, revises instructions to codify Rule 9503, Child Care Center Licensing Sections. Section 31, Senator Housley, SF2, revises instructions to codify 9502, Family Child Care Licensing Sections. And Sections 29 through 31, we would like more feedback from the stakeholders, DHS, and legislative staff on what makes sense to codify. In closing, the Family Care and Aging Committee was expanded this year in order to focus on the regulatory and administrative barriers that exist for our child care providers, as well as to develop recommendations to reduce the burden. I don't think I'm the only one here at the table that has heard from multiple family members and child care providers the need that we have for more child providers and retain the providers that we already have. And so this bill, Senate File 2, is to make child care more affordable, accessible, because it's increasingly difficult to find, particularly in communities in greater Minnesota. And our child care providers are in danger due to the pressures of government overreach. This means families could be left without options for safe, reliable child care. By investing in our child care providers, we are investing in economic growth for greater Minnesota. I believe this bill, which includes recommendations by DHS, licensures, and the providers themselves, delivers the right solutions to dealing with Minnesota's child care crisis and the unnecessary state regulations that burden our child care providers. And, Mr. Chair, I have one oral amendment that I just want to do quickly or I will forget. Line 17, page 17, line 6. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to make an oral amendment.
Yes. What is the amendment?
Line 17.6, it says, review parent-aware participation and identify obstacles, improvements. After improvements, cross out or alternatives to the parent-aware program. So, and it would have to say, review parent-aware, insert program, participation and identify obstacles, delete comma, insert and improvements, delete comma, put period. It's like voice to text.
Has everybody got that? Council? Council?
Mr. Chair, members, the oral amendment, page 17, line 6, after aware, insert program. After obstacles, strike the comma and insert and. After improvements, strike the comma and delete or and insert a period. Page 17, line 7, strike line 7. To read, review parent-aware program participation and identify obstacles and improvements.
Does everyone understand the amendment? Senator Housley moves the oral amendment. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is adopted.
Mr. Chair, I'll just tell you what the A6 amendment is also. I'll explain it.
Yes.
We've already moved it, but the A6 amendment to the A4 amendment contains an appropriation adjustment and adds a requirement for the commissioner to consult with providers, parents, and county agencies prior to completing the plain language handbook. This has been a common request from the providers, and we wanted to include them in the process so that the handbook meets their needs. That's it. That's all I got.
I believe you have some testifiers, Senator Housley.
Yes, I do, Mr.
Cindy
Chair.
Cunningham and Julie Seidel, if they could come forward. They don't want to. Yeah, I'll invite them. Or don't.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Acting Chairman and Senators. Julie Seidel from MACCP. And I'll just go through the sections that I need to comment on. Section 1, the exit interview, is a fabulous idea here to remove part of that language. And the analogy I used for this is, imagine driving down the road, a police officer pulls you over, doesn't give you a ticket at the time, but 3 weeks to 3 months later, you get a ticket in the mail. You don't remember if you were actually driving, where you were at, what the violation was about. This is what providers go through when we receive a correction order weeks to months after our licensing visit. So removing that language where it has to be discussed before the licensor leaves, and the discussion can be not that you're getting a correction order. They can even tell us, I'm not sure about this one. I'm going to go back to the office, take a look, and then I will let you know. That way we have that notification that we can gather information that we need so that we can defend ourselves. And the spouses, adding that language in there, that's absolutely fantastic, because we do have a provider that was given a correction order because her husband was doing dishes. I think we talked about this before. And you know, our family, it's our family home too. When my teenager is home sick, she shouldn't have to have training to be in the home while she's sick. And for goodness sake, if she wants to help me do the dishes, I don't want her to have training. She has to be able to do that, because it's far and few in between there. Section 2, the handbook, it is great. I do like the addition here of adding in conjunction with providers, because we need to make sure that it's user-friendly. And unfortunately, a lot of times when we have government entities writing things. They make it very technical, so that's a great addition to that language. Section 3, the license or dispute. This is really important to child care providers that we are brought into this process. If we have a problem with a license or we don't agree with a correction order she's giving us, this gives us the chance to be involved in that process, to know that they've actually reached out to DHS, what they've actually said to DHS, and be able to give that input. This will save time and money, as it will stop erroneous correction orders from happening. There won't be the correction order that DHS has to go through, and then the provider has to do a reconsideration, and then it goes to lawyers for DHS. So this will save a lot of time and a lot of money in the end. On the fix-it ticket, which is Section 4, there currently are only 13 items on that fix-it ticket. So adding the language that anything that is not imposing a risk on the children will keep a lot of correction orders being written too. They could come into my house and buy my entryway as a bobby pin. My daycare is located in my 3rd level. Technically, that bobby pin could be a correction order depending on your licensor. I should have the chance to pick that up. It's not an imminent risk to the children. The children are on our separate level. It's gated off. We need that. We live in our homes. Things are going to happen. Your kids are going to run around. They're going to unplug things. We need to have that chance to say, oops, here, I put that back. I one time answered the door when my licensor came and left a knife on my kitchen countertop. My licensor is very reasonable. She knows my kids are downstairs. That could have been a correction order. It wasn't, because she understood that it was safe, the kids were safe. This is just giving us that opportunity when kids are not in danger to not receive correction orders. Section 5 and 6, that's not related to family child care, so I won't be commenting on that. Section 7, removing the orientation class for providers that are moving, is fantastic. We've had providers that have been delayed up to 6 months from reopening because they can't get into these classes. Sections basically 8 through 15, great clarification on our training, when trainings have to be done. One of the biggest problems we had when we are restricted to a certain month or now even a certain date with CPR is that classes are canceled. With the weather that we had here recently, Think Small canceled classes 2 weeks in a row, which left providers scrambling to get classes within the same month. Section 16, family members being exempt, is also a great thing too. We have grandparents that visit from out of state. My dad comes from Florida. I don't want to force him to have training so he can spend some time with my daughter, or worse yet, make him leave my home for the 11 hours a day that I'm open. Section 17, the emergency sub. I know this language will have to change a little bit because we've had some discussions with DHS in a stakeholder meeting, but we have to have this. This is one of the most important things, well, not one of, they're all important here, but this is very important for us. We were told at one time we could not have an emergency substitute, so if we called 911 because we were having a medical issue and left the children with a police officer, we would still get a correction order because they didn't have proper training. So this is very important to us. We have to be able to take care of ourselves. As caregivers, we're kind of the last people we take care of because we take care of everybody else. Section 18, the emergency plan, it's great we're not giving it to parents anymore, but I was wondering if we can add to that to not post it in a prominent place, and I should have discussed that with you. There was some discussion with providers that if there is an actual intrusion into our home and that emergency plan is right there by our front door, there's only so many places that we can hide in our home, and to let that intruder know where it is really isn't a good idea. Section 19, the ombudsperson. We're going to watch this very carefully. It appears to be something very positive, but unfortunately, a lot of positive things DHS has turned into a negative, but we're excited about that one too. 789, the annual refresher course, that will free us up a lot of time to do classes that we want to take to enhance our programs. Maybe we want to discover Reggio or different areas like that, so condensing those courses will give us ample time to do other things. Section 21, this is something we've really talked about a lot. Currently, right now, we are subjected to 30 days a year, and in those 30 days, if I am gone for 1 hour, it's considered a day. So being here at the legislature, I use up pretty much most of my sub time. We have providers that need medical leave for cancer treatments. We have providers that would like maternity leave. And in order to not displace our families and the children that we care for, we'd like to hire a sub to come in. DHS has offered us up 300 hours in a 12-month period. Considering most of us work 11 to 12 hours a day, that's less than 30 days that we're allotted at this time. We're asking for the 720 hours because at 11, 12-hour day, that's going to equate to 60 days. Most of this time, the providers are still going to be around. It's not like we're leaving our home and just leaving these substitutes to care for the kids. There's a medical reason, a family member medical reason that we need to have that substitute available for those days. We're trying to save our business, and we're trying to save the families that we serve from having to find somebody else for 60 days to take care of their kids while we have to close down. This is a twofold. It's important to all of us. Section 22, we prefer kind of moving rule to statute at this time, but the one thing in there I really like is the Parent Aware. Parent Aware needs a complete overhaul, and I actually have a couple of letters here signed on by 13 child care associations in regards to Parent Aware and how it is skewed so terribly against family child care. Right now, if you do a search in Parent Aware, the first thing that comes up is the school-based systems and the child care centers, and family child care is at the bottom. The coaches that we have are pushing us to start at one-star levels. Like hotels, would you stay at a one-star hotel versus a four-star hotel? And that's how parents imagine us. The Parent Aware needs a huge overhaul before it is connected to any more funding, any more pushes for anything, because it's not fair to family child care. It is completely skewed against us. Section 23 is absolutely fantastic to remove duplicate and redundant paperwork and to push things electronically. My file cabinets are getting bigger and fuller. I know that all providers would be happy with that. And then as far as allocating funds, I won't really comment on that. And then Section 31, codifying rule into statute. This would cost very little to do, and the reason we're asking for this is because we want to take that rulemaking authority away from DHS so that we know when changes are going to be made, they have to go through the same process as the general public. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Seidel. Nicole Grinswick-Nicholson? And then we will be, I'm sorry.
Cindy is right there.
Pardon?
This one first. This one.
Oh, I'm sorry, wrong one. Cindy, and then could Nicole come up and be ready? And then we will be having two more, and we'll call them as they come up.
Acting
So
Chair.
Cindy?
Yep, Acting Chair and committee members. Mainly what I want to say is thank you. You have all worked hard on this committee, and multiple other committees have heard great amount of testimony on all of these pieces. And what it should message to all providers is you have listened and you have addressed some really key pieces that will bring relief. A couple ones that I will comment on is the plain language handbook is one that we have hoped for and tried to get through with McPenn. I actually developed two classes. I'm also a trainer, so I do trainings, one on licensing visits, which I use in my own this morning, and also on reading and understanding Rule 2 in the licensing system. Very few providers know and understand that. To have a handbook to help through that and to have providers involved with that would be huge. The ombudsperson, I have testified in favor of at a few of the hearings. I akin it to in St. Paul, we have an ombudsperson for the school district, doesn't report to the superintendent, reports to the school board, is separate, is distinct, needs to be outside of the political and realm of life. But to be able to have a phone number, I'm one of the providers in the state that if providers know me, find out about me, or know someone, I will get phone calls on a weekly basis. They just don't know who to go to, where to get the answers, and I obviously can only give a certain amount of direction and advice, whether it's to call a lawyer and give them some list of names or who in DHS to contact, or whether it's their county commissioners. And I think I do a good job in doing those things, but I don't think I should be the point unless someone wants to increase my pay away from my business. The other pieces are the business training dollars and the investment dollars. And again, all of those are critically important. I did take a business training recently, wished I had had it 20 years ago. But those are the things that we take on our businesses and need to continue to improve. My only piece about the investment is that my hope is that that continues to be considered for family child care too. Family child care is the strongest connected to our families. Consistency of care doesn't mean the children walk in the same building. If it's a center building, which many I respect, they have multiple different providers within that setting that might interact with that children. As family child care, we are the one consistent care person. We are also the affordable. When dollars and cents get thrown around about the amounts that child care costs, all of those dollars and cents are being referred to as centers. Cut it in half, maybe a little bit more, and then you get to what a family child care is. So I think some of those things need to be really looked at in that part. As far as the codifying, we've been looking, again, one of my classes is on Rule 2 and trying to teach providers to understand that this is law, but then to try to figure out how to understand where it's at in 9502 and 245A and navigate all of those is way beyond a 2-hour class. So at least to have one space to go to know where our laws and rules are would be incredibly helpful. So thank you very much for your hard work and dedication and the message that you're giving to family providers, that you do care, you have listened, and you're acting on those things. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. I hope I don't butcher this, Ms. Greenswick-Mickelson?
It's been butchered worse. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Nicole Grunswick-Mickelson, and I serve as the Executive Director of Region 9 Development Commission in Mankato, Minnesota. And I also am here I serve as the President of the Greater Minnesota Partnership, which sister organization is the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. And I'm here to support this bill. I've been doing the job as Executive Director of Region 9. We serve the 9 counties around Mankato. I've been having that position for the last 7 years. And doing economic development in the last 7 years has meant a lot of different things. However, in the last 2 to 3 years, all of a sudden, child care has been one of our #1 legislative priorities. We used to talk about issues like we still do, transportation and bonding, and now child care has really dominated our conversation. So I appreciate having the opportunity to be here. You'll be hearing from other individuals who represented the initiative foundations, and so being true Minnesotans, they will probably not give themselves the credit that they deserve. So I'd like to kind of share how we partner with the initiative foundations that serve the 80 counties of Greater Minnesota. My 9 counties are also in part of the initiative foundation, SMIF, the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. They have 11 other counties that represent Southeast Minnesota. Being an economic development district, we worked hand in glove with the initiative foundation. And so why I'm very supportive of this is because they truly work with the communities, they know their communities, and this legislation helps make it feasible that these individuals, the child care providers and centers, are able to get trainings in their own communities. I want to give you for instance, one of the counties in my southeast corner of my region, Faribault County, community of Wells is just shy of 2,200 individuals. I attended an event in December, and they had a community conversation on child care, and it was a horribly cold evening, late at night. Over 50 individuals showed up to talk about child care. In the city of Wells, they have at least 107 child care spots that are needed. So just to kind of give you a for instance, and so trying to create and look at creative solutions, I really appreciate that this legislation is creative, and there's not a silver bullet, that it's not just training, that there is some room for the trainings, but also looking at what the communities specifically need to have those community conversations, as well as renovating and assisting with startups as well. So that's really what I'd like to kind of focus on, as well as I have some facts from the Initiative Foundation that I'd like to share, again, from the 20 counties of Southeast Minnesota. They said in the SMIF region, we have 20 counties with a population of over 730,000. We currently have approximately 1,600 family providers and 140 centers. There's a shortage of over 8,600 slots. With the small deed grant last year that we have partnered with First Children's Finance on $37,500 was the SMIF amount, we helped create 411 new child care slots, along with doing numerous trainings and offering other resources such as curriculum. In our current quality childcare program, 83% of the program participants increase their knowledge and skills that support childcare development. 96% of participants increase the quality of their business skills, and an average of 97% of the attendees rated their trainings as high value. So again, my belief is that if a partner organization can help sing the praises of organizations like the Initiative Foundations, that means a little bit more. And so I really want to just say that I'm very supportive of it, because to see the momentum that has been created with the investments so far, I look forward to, and I feel really optimistic as to what can further be done. On a more of a kind of a related note, the workforce shortage, as we know, is already here. It's really becoming an issue. So we, in Region 9 especially, and the rest of Greater Minnesota, we need every single worker to be able to have the opportunity to be in a position and not feel forced to have to stay at home per se. That kind of hit home with our small staff. One of our employees, when they had a child in April, I said, "Do you have a child care set up?" "Oh, no, but we're going to be looking into it." He was shocked at how difficult and challenging it was. I want to read a really short paragraph from him, from his point of view. He said, "The waiting lists for infants range for 9 to 18 months. We just heard back from one of our local providers that will have an opening for Ava in November of 2019 in the infant room, when she's technically no longer an infant but a toddler. In other words, the wait is so long that when a spot opens up for infants, the child's no longer in that category. We called every location we could think of weekly, and a spot just happened to be open after 9 months. If we hadn't called that day to that particular provider, we would have missed the opportunity. I spent more time calling daycare centers than I ever spent looking for a job. Several kids in Ava's daycare come from over an hour away. The economic waste of having parents and kids travel in excess of 2 hours per day to find a daycare is apparent." Luckily for him, he has a lovely supervisor who was very accommodating, and little Ava sat in more conference calls and meetings than she ever should have for being just shy of 10 months old. So with that, I just want to again reiterate my support and appreciation for the work that this committee is doing in hearing legislation like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Jost and Scott Marquardt, if you could come forward. Welcome to the committee. You want to introduce yourself?
Mr. Chair and committee members, I am Nancy Jost. I work for West Central Initiative. I'm the director of early childhood there. We're based in Fergus Falls. We're one of the 6 Minnesota Initiative Foundations. So I'm here to express my support of Senate File 2. We all know that there's a child care shortage in all of Minnesota. But what is unique in rural Minnesota is that some people are either not moving to our communities, or they're in our communities and not taking jobs they want and need because they can't find childcare. Businesses are thinking twice about locating in rural Minnesota because of the childcare shortage. Access in rural Minnesota is an even greater issue than affordability. We're all part of one Minnesota, and when rural families, businesses, and communities struggle with this issue, it affects all of Minnesota. Some of you may be asking why the funding should go to the MIFs, the Minnesota Initiative Foundations. The first reason, I think, is because we cover all of rural Minnesota, and I think that's unique to the MIFs. Secondly, businesses, family child care providers, child care centers, and communities are used to partnering with us to make our communities economically viable and the best places they can be for children to grow and thrive. Child care is part of the economic development of communities by allowing parents to go to work, but they're also a business in and of themselves. High-quality child care also helps children prepare for school and life. Thirdly, the MIFs work closely with Child Care Aware, our county licensors, First Children's Finance, to recruit and retain child care providers. We partner in trainings, technical assistance, and supporting child care providers in any way that we can. An example of this is at West Central Initiative, we're just going to be having our second annual meeting of those who work with child care providers in our region, and we get together to talk about how we can work together to better support child care providers. We are also used to working closely with DHS, MDE, MDH, and DEED on projects and on committees. The MIFs are well equipped to put this funding to good use to decrease the child care shortage. We have a history of doing this, and we have the ability to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Senator Housley. I am Scott Marquardt. I'm Vice President of Southwest Initiative Foundation. I myself live in Montevideo. We serve 18 counties and 2 native nations of Southwest Minnesota. Basically, our corners are Laverne, Jackson, Ortonville, and Litchfield. This is the fastest growing economic development issue facing our region today, significantly impacting job creation, retention, entrepreneurship, and business growth region-wide. I know many things that the House and the Senate and all of the agencies are talking about. This is just really impacting us on a daily basis. It's making it very difficult to nearly impossible in some situations for our employers to recruit and retain the talent they need to compete in a global marketplace. I'm grateful that this issue is receiving the attention that it is this year at the legislature. Both Nancy and Nicole provided a lot of statistics. I won't repeat them or give you a lot more that you've heard already. In our region alone, we're at least 3,100 slots that are short, and that number is growing on a daily basis. Why us? I'm going to limit my comments to Section 28 specifically because in interest of time. You've trusted and invested in the Initiative Foundation since 1986. We're grateful for the 33-plus year relationship that we have with the state through a number of investments that when you've trusted in us with entrepreneurship programming, loan capital, and other innovative collaborations to make our communities and families and businesses the best that they can be. We're very thankful for that. We don't operate in silos. It's not about us being the sole players. Partnership and collaboration is exactly how we're going to do this. I think it's very important to emphasize who we'll work with if we're fortunate enough to receive this funding. Community banks, First Children's Finance, economic development organizations, K-12 and community colleges is huge for us in the solution space. Chambers of commerce, community action agencies, the faith community, key player in the area, news, media, child care aware, and all of the partners in the ecosystem. We're not going to do this thing on our own, and we'll be grateful to receive your trust to be the intermediary for this funding. Our Rolodex does go deep into the culture and fabric of our communities and regions. A key element in this bill, and something we're very thankful is in there, is engagement in the private sector, that's specifically brought out. Our secret sauce at the foundations is our experience, success, and ability to engage the private sector and bring them to the table for critical conversations and explorations. Progress toward this issue in Greater Minnesota will not happen without private sector leadership, without their investment and their commitment. We have the experience to bring them to the table, and again, we thank you for itemizing that in the bill. Senator. We approach this with a regional lens, which is our way of life and how we do business in Greater Minnesota, and that adds a lot of significant efficiencies and opportunities to collaborate and share best practices. As Nancy said, one size does not fit all when it comes to the child care crisis, but we think regionally while acting locally, and that helps drive momentum and investment into solutions for our communities. When we think about the diversity of Greater Minnesota, that adds another paradigm to it. We're home to Worthington, which according to ACS data is Minnesota's most diverse city per capita. This funding will allow us to continue to drive culturally respectful, culturally appropriate solutions to address this in the Wilmers, the St. James, the Worthingtons, the Milans, and communities that are growing significantly with families of color. Again, I just want to emphasize that we'll provide a tremendous ROI and value to the state in this investment in us. We foster leverage. We bring a regional lens. We try to be as effective and as efficient as possible using the private sector and collaboration and really lifting up the ecosystem in this area specific to our unique demographics. We were all created in 1986. We do some things differently, but we bring the regional lens and the statewide voice. So thank you, Senator. Thank you, committee members, and we look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marquardt. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to testify? If so, please come forward. Good afternoon, or I guess it's almost evening. Can you identify yourself?
Chair, members of the committee, I'm Stacy Stout with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today in support of increasing the supply of quality childcare in our state. The Minnesota Chamber represents over 2,300 companies, mostly small to medium-sized businesses. The number one concern we hear from our members is skilled workforce shortage. As this committee knows, and everyone in this room knows, the child care shortage is compounding the workforce shortage in our communities. The acute shortage of affordable child care facilities, particularly in greater Minnesota, impacts employment opportunities for those with young children and compounds the workforce shortage for employers. There are many proposals this session, and we appreciate the work of this committee to address the many challenges facing our child care providers. This bill addresses the shortage by facilitating community planning to increase the supply of quality child care and participation in Parent Aware, our state's quality and improvement rating system. This is key for two reasons. Addressing our current workforce shortage so parents can go to work and feel good knowing that their children are in a quality learning environment is the first reason. The second is addressing our future workforce shortage by ensuring that children from all backgrounds will have access to high-quality learning environments, preparing them for kindergarten and ultimately closing the achievement gap. Therefore, we support this legislation because it will help communities to increase their number of high-quality providers. Additionally, any government spending in this area needs to be tied to quality and accountability to ensure that we get a good return on investment. To keep our workforce challenges from hampering economic growth, we must support and encourage the growth of high-quality early child care providers. We appreciate Senator Housley's work on this and this committee's work, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Members, or Senator Housley, do you have anything, or do you want to take questions at this point?
I'll take questions. Mr. Chair, I'll take questions.
Members? Senator Eakin.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Housley. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. I think it's important that we are addressing and try to eliminate the ambiguities and complexities in our current system and to address what I call a crisis in this area. I'm glad to see the Family Child Care Task Force that's being proposed here. And maybe more of just a suggestion. I was wondering on that list, one group that I think should be represented as well probably would be parents. And I don't know how to really accomplish that. There's not an association that probably represents parents and child care providers. But if there's some way that we could also have some parental participation, parents' voice in that process, I think that would be helpful as well as we move forward.
Mr. Chair, Senator Eakin, thank you for that. I will add it to the list of things that we need to tweak. From here, we go to HSR and then to finance. So we'll powwow again tomorrow. So thank you again for that suggestion.
Any other comments? I just want to comment that this is a tremendous piece of work. There's been a lot of individuals who have contributed, and I want to thank Senator Housley especially for gathering this all together in monumental task of bringing it all into a single bill and having such a cohesive whole. So thank you for that. Any final remarks, Senator Housley?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I want to thank all of the authors and their willingness to let me put them into this big bill. I really appreciate it, and I thank the members for listening to all the bills and to me and all 27 sections of this. I want to thank Mr. Monahan and Mr. Oswald for their hard work. They've been up. I don't think they've slept in the last 3 days, so thank you so much. And I want to thank Larissa Fisher and Rachel Grooms for all of their hard work on this, because we pulled us all together, and all of the stakeholders that we've been meeting with and getting all of their input to be able to get this all into one really good bill, I think. And so hopefully this moves along smoothly. It is a crisis, Senator Eakin, and we need to fix this now. Like Senator Weber said earlier, we can't keep putting this off. It's already a couple of years too late, so we need to get something done on this this year. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members, for listening to the bill today and passing it to HSR.
Senator Housley renews her motion to move Senate File 2 as amended, be recommended to pass, and be referred to the Committee on Human Services Reform and Finance and Policy. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Everybody enjoy their evening. See you tomorrow.
I believe this is all the business for the committee, so at this point we are adjourned.